we can let them know also. So
Yeah. Well, thank you all for joining us today. This is a discussion on polyvagal theory and hacks with Lisa Saremi. My name is Elise Ekman, and I am on the Access Elite team that has brought this event to you today. For those of you who aren't familiar, Access Elite is a health and wellness company that provides on-demand wellness content, same-day prescription delivery, and facilitates live virtual events such as these that you can tune into every day, as well as much more. We are so glad that we can facilitate this event and bring some positivity and connection to your day. So I just want to take a moment and thank each of you for being here. And with that, I am thrilled to introduce our guest today. We have Lisa Saremi, who is a marriage and family therapist, a yoga instructor, and a transformation coach. And as we were discussing, as we let you guys in, we are going to have some questions posed during the discussion. So feel free to type them into the chat, and we can take it from there. Thank you so much.
great.
Let's get going.
Thank you so much, Elise, and thank you all, each and every one of you, for being here today. I hope that you find this time insightful and useful. We're going to be talking a little bit about polyvagal theory, as well as how can we harness this perspective to better self-regulate, and some ways that we can do that. So today we'll get into what is the autonomic nervous system, polyvagal theory, and describe it. We'll talk about the 3 neural platforms that are introduced with polyvagal theory. We'll talk about vagal tone and how we can use the breath. And then I'll also talk a little bit about how I like to use polyvagal theory when working with clients. So with the autonomic nervous system, think about your nervous system having different parts, but there's one part that's called the autonomic, and that means that it just responds automatically. So just think of your breath, just like when we sleep, we're breathing and we're not conscious of the breath. The autonomic nervous system is like these little antlers, or I don't know if they're antlers, but these little feelers, let's call them, and they're constantly searching out there, checking out what's happening in the outer environment, and then also having a dialogue with the inner environment and a lot of our history and our past experiences, and its job is really to protect us. So many people are aware of the 2 different parts of the autonomic nervous system, and if you're not, we'll talk about them now anyway. So the sympathetic part is the piece that kind of puts you into more of a mobilized state. It's the part that is really there to protect you when you kind of feel stressed out, or if you feel threatened in any way. It's the fight and flight piece of our nervous system. So when that happens, there's a lot of physiology shifts that also occur. You might notice your heart rate gets a little faster. You're able to get air a little easier. You are getting energized so that you can be mobilized. It's a very inflammatory type of response. And then our parasympathetic nervous system, it's really there to support our rest and our recovery. So when we're activating that part of the nervous system, or that part gets activated, our heart rate starts to kind of go down. Our body gets prepared for more regeneration. It stores the energy, and it becomes more anti-inflammatory. So these images kind of describe that. And then as we move into polyvagal theory, we move beyond this bimodal construct of just the parasympathetic and the sympathetic. So we're going to go over just a couple concepts. First of all, polyvagal theory was introduced by Dr. Stephen Porges, and he also coined the term neuroception. So neuroception, it just means that automatic process of scanning the environment, scanning for risk, and wanting to find our safety. We don't have to be aware that it's happening at all. It is always happening, and our nervous system is always looking to see if we're in danger or if we're safe. And then interoception is when we actually can be conscious and sometimes we're not conscious about it. It encompasses more of how our brain integrates the signals that are happening in the body. So you might really notice that you start to get maybe a little more activated and you notice what that feels like. So you might actually have an awareness of that. And as we'll get into, yoga is a really great way to also invite this in, because the more we can become aware of our nervous system, the more we can become empowered in our ability to self-regulate ourselves. So as we get into polyvagal theory, as Deb Dana points out, we've got these three pathways that we're going to start to look at. We're going to start to look at how those patterns of response are happening. And remembering with neuroception, they're happening without our consciousness. We can use other practices to bring in our awareness so that we can actually then circumvent where the nervous system is going, what it's experiencing, and very importantly, what moods and emotions and behavioral states that become accessible to us individually. So as we get into polyvagal theory, there's three neural platforms that Porges talks about. And also, if you are a yoga practitioner and you're familiar with what the gunas are, I'm going to do a little light overlay of that. What I'm covering right now in our 30-minute time could be a three-day dive. So I'm trying to keep it really light, but also rich. So in yoga, guna is it's just kind of our relationship to nature and the energy that's taking place in nature. And there's a mirror that happens with our nervous system as it comes through the polyvagal theory and these three lenses. So I wanted to integrate that. The first neural platform is a defense immobilized state. So it engages the dorsal vagal complex. Just really think about like a deer in headlights, right? It's a freeze response. It's literally when our life feels threatened to that point, we can go into a freeze response. So how does that show up in life? Well, it can show up through forms of disassociation, completely shutting down. It could also be looked at through the view of the gunas as the energy of tamas. And tamas is kind of this inertia energy. It's really heavy. It's hard to get things going, right? As you would be in a immobilized state. And also you could think of things like depression. You know, it's got that kind of an energy. So another neural platform is what we are probably a little more familiar with, which is that mobilized state that I was just talking about in the previous slide. And it's where it's a sympathetic response. Now, when this happens, it's similar to the guna rajas. Rajas is more of an anxious state. It's more mobilized, it's more alert, it's more ready to go, but also it could be a little fear-based, right? It can create states of agitation. It can create states of anger as more accessible. And this is one of those neural platforms that a lot of us are in continually, especially with for a lot of us, not all of us, but through this quarantine process, a lot of us have maybe even had the opportunity to shift or experience more one of these different states. As I'm talking about them, you might relate. So just think about that for yourself. And then as we move into the third neural platform, we're talking about the ventral vagal complex. Think about this as your optimal functioning. So when we're able to access this state or this platform, then we're able to experience things like connection and love and peace and equanimity. And it is connected to the guna of sattva. And so through the yogic lens and through the gunas, in yoga, we're always looking at how can we kind of find that equanimous, I know I didn't even say that right, but sorry, I think you know what I meant, state. That state where we feel balanced and we feel at ease and we're able to feel the energy of love that really is the feel-good stuff, right? Um, so this is polyvagal theory. These are the neural platforms that are broken down. And actually the next, we don't have time, but these platforms, if you were to dive a little deeper, give us access to about 5 different states that Stephen Porges gets into. This image just gives us kind of a little more of a perspective of some of the things we might expect in those different neural platforms. It even breaks down some of the physiology, right? So we can look at what gets increased in our bodies, that our bodies get influenced as far as the insulin activity in our bodies. We go into an immobilized state. I'm talking from the top down right now, from freeze going down. We can really just go into it's almost like a fainted state, and how that affects our heart rate and how that affects our blood pressure is it slows everything down, as you can imagine. And when we slow down, we can also check out, and that's where that disassociation comes in. So what are some of the other things that we experience in this state? Helplessness, shame, hopelessness. We're almost preparing for death in a way, right? And we go into the I can't. As we look at the fight and flight sympathetic state, it's more of a panic response. Lots of fear, lots of anxiety, even rage, because rage and anger, these things are there to actually protect us, right? So when we feel fearful and our safety is threatened, it would make sense that we would go into this space. And then if you look at the nervous system's impacts on the physiology, you can see that our blood pressure gets increases, our heart rate increases, we have more adrenaline, we have the ability to just move, right? Think of everything moving, 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 moving. Much more of a stressed state. And then that ideal functioning state is our social engagement. And you can see here that when we're in this ventral vagal space, which we'll get into in a little more here in a moment, we're able to digest things better, literally down into the body, right? It's where we're going to experience the most levels of health and vitality. It's when our circulation is kind of happening in a very balanced way. And we're able to just be available more for connection in our lives. So how do we get to that state of optimal functioning? Here, I want to talk about vagal tone because that's kind of the gateway. So it's not that we have another part of the nervous system. We're still in that bimodal construct of the parasympathetic and the sympathetic. However, what I just described to you in the parasympathetic component of our nervous system, that is what houses whether or not we go into a freeze state or whether or not we can experience that social engagement and connection. And it's through our vagal nerve that kind of helps us think about that as like the controller, right? So when we're not conscious about how our nervous system is responding, then we just kind of become actually react to the nervous system. When we're able to bring in consciousness, and how do we do it is by noticing those different shifts that might start to happen in our physiology and how they feel in our bodies as they happen. Then we can come in and we're going to look at how, but we're going to be able to do things to increase our vagal tone. And when we increase our vagal tone, that means we can switch easier from a fight and flight response to more of a rest and a digest mode, and vice versa. So you become a little more empowered with a sense of agency as you move through life and as you face different stresses in your life. It gives you the ability to increase your resilience, right? Because as we practice these things, just like as we would practice increasing the muscle tone in our bicep, we become better. We become better at increasing our awareness. And from that space, we can really, really then influence our nervous system and the states that become more available to us. And then beyond that, there's actually an impact that it has on our health and our well-being in the physical portion. It improves our immune system. It improves a lot of our different systems. It creates it reduces the inflammation in our body, right? Stress creates inflammation. So for our overall health and well-being, all the way down to even our physical health, working with our nervous system and increasing vagal tone is beneficial. So again, this just a little more of what I was just speaking about, how when we have good vagal tone, we're able to be more responsive, we're able to respond better and faster and quicker and more consciously, and then be more effective in the way we respond, actually responding rather than reacting, rather than coming from a place where we're not conscious. And then we can get back to more balanced states when our vagal tone, when we're like working that muscle, so to speak. When we don't have good vagal tone, the way we respond is really limited, and it's very actually reactive rather than responsive. So we're less effective and we're less appropriate, and we're actually even going to feel, the way we feel is going to be less joyful, right? And we're going to have a harder time feeling empowered in our ability to regulate the way we feel on all levels, physically, mentally, and emotionally. So how do we activate that vagus nerve? Well, there's different ways. This is just a list of different ways that we can do it. Some of us might meditate and or not, and maybe it's something you want to start practicing. Maybe it's not for you, but meditation is one way. Most people like massage, so that's a good thing. That's one way you can also do that. Singing and chanting actually is great. So if you have some favorite music or want to get familiar with healing sounds or have different mantras that are in alignment with your, belief system and your spirituality, that's a really great way. Also cold, whether you're drinking cold water or doing cryotherapy, that cold experience actually helps the parasympathetic part of the nervous system and vagal tone. Yoga, breathing techniques, we're going to try one. Prayer, just having that connection to something that's deeper within ourselves. And then even things like probiotics actually help increase and activate the vagus nerve. If you have ever tried fasting, intermittent fasting, you can look that up on YouTube and Google. But just reducing that caloric intake is another way that we can also impact our vagus nerve. So our breath is this really amazing tool. I talk about it often, especially in working with clients, because we can use our breath. In the morning, let's say you're not really a morning person and you have a hard time getting going. There are ways that you can actually get yourself mobilized, right? Using your breath, using a little movement, nothing too crazy. It doesn't have to be crazy. And this slide here kind of shows you. So in the morning, when you wake up, if you take more attention to the inhale and the retention on the inhale, a little bit shorter of the exhale and the suspension on the exhale, then you're able to find a little more stimulation in the body. If you've had a stressful moment or day, you want to actually do the opposite, because that's going to help you find a calmer state, and it's going to it's going to help massage that vagal tone. So if you're going to do something that, like you have an important meeting or you're going to have a nervous conversation with somebody you care about, you can also use the breath in the same way, just like you would respond to stress, as a way to prepare yourself before you go into that situation. If you're like having an afternoon slump, which a lot of us might have around 3 or 4 in the afternoon, then we want to focus again on the inhalation and on the retention, because the inhalation is invigorating and it's activating. If you've been sitting for a long time and you feel lethargic, or kind of like that Thomas energy that we were talking about earlier, again, working with the inhalation is going to help be a little more activating and invigorating. And then if you're somebody that has a hard time kind of winding it down at the end of the day, your breath can be another way, by using those longer exhales and longer suspensions with the exhales. And you don't have to do super long practices. Even if you were to work with your breath for 10 rounds, you might notice that it might make a difference. So let's work with it now. So sometimes just being able to experience what I'm talking about, and we let's see, yeah, we got enough time. We might not have enough time to do as many exercises as I wanted to do, but one thing that I definitely want you to get connected with is your pulse and the way the breath affects your pulse. So you might take your 2 fingers on top of the pulse at the wrist. And then sometimes people will tell me that they can't find it there. So if you're in that category, you can try underneath here. And so I'm just going to give everybody a moment to find their pulse. And then take your attention inward. If it feels okay, you can close your eyes. If you prefer to keep your eyes open, feel free to keep them open. And just notice the pulse. You don't need to count it. Just feel it. Just notice what its rhythm is. And then notice your breath and just notice what the rhythm of your breath is. So from here, let's take a deep breath into the belly, fill up your ribs, fill up your chest, hold it at the top. Notice the pulse for 4, 3, 2, exhale out the mouth, letting it go, maybe audibly. Keep pressing the breath out. Notice the pulsation for 3, 2, 1. Inhale once again through the nose, nice and slow. Notice your pulse as you take the breath in, pulling it all the way to the crown. Feel all 3 chambers fill up. Hold the breath at the top. Notice the pulsation. And exhale out the mouth, releasing the breath, emptying the breath. Keep emptying until you can't anymore and hold the retention. Notice the pulse. And then one more time, deep breath in, filling up, pulling it up all the way to the crown. Feel the belly full. Feel the ribs expand. Feel the chest lift. Now hold the breath at the top. Let the stress begin to bubble to the surface with that inhale. Notice the impact it has on your pulse. Sip in just a little more air and hold. Exhale out your mouth. Empty, 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 empty. Keep pressing the breath out. Hold the retention. Keep noticing the pulse. Now breathe in through the nose for 3, 2, 1. Exhale through the nose for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Inhale through the nose for 3, 2, 1. Exhale through the nose for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. One more round through the nose. 2, 1. Exhale through the nose. 4, 3, 2, 1. And then back to normal breathing. You can release the pulse. I want to open it up if you wanted to just take a moment and maybe on chat, put down any comments about what your experience was. I'll give you guys a moment and then and so it's okay if you guys aren't feeling chatty in the chat box. Oh wait, I think I actually see them and I didn't realize. Okay, a calming experience, pulse slowed. I barely felt the pulse at the end. Same, felt a relaxation and a lightening. Okay, great. So what you may notice, and you can always try this, the breath in general is going to give us that overall feeling. And generally speaking, when we're inhaling, the pulse will go a little faster. And when we're exhaling, the pulse goes a little slower, right? And so if we think back to that image of using the inhalation and the retention to kind of generate energy, and using the exhale and the retention of the exhale to find more calmer states. Those are just a couple ways we can use the breath to help support our vagal tone and the different experiences our nervous system has. So these are just a few questions for self-reflection. If you have a piece of paper, a pen, or if you even want to type for yourself, this is for yourself. We're not sharing any of this, but just, really noticing as you take in that information today, if there's any patterns of behavior that you might have noticed in relationship to your own nervous system. If you feel like you have a sense of agency and the ability to influence discomfort when it arises in your life, if you do, what are some of your effective coping mechanisms and practices? And then what are some of the things that you might consider adding into your life after our time today? And then also, do you truly give yourself enough self-care? Like really just answering that to yourself, for yourself. And how is that like affecting the other areas of your life, right? Just this little nervous system, so powerful. And then are there any changes that you see that you can better do to better support your container? So that's kind of some of the work I do when I work with people is I integrate yoga therapy and depth psychology. The yoga piece is really a way for people to increase their ability to self-regulate, to understand themselves more mentally, physically, emotionally, and how all of those integrate together. As well as once a person is able to really feel that safety in their own container, then we can do deeper work working with the content that sits in the unconscious, which is a lot of what we do with depth psychology, practicing things like active imagination and personification, working with myth, metaphor, and symbol. And this is just a summary of what I was just saying. The yoga helps us really hone in through the nervous system to create that container so that when there's chaos around us, that we can still find our ground inside. And then the depth psychology allows us to use the imaginal realm, which is what happens when we're sleeping, right? Dreams are a really great way that we integrate in what gets kind of pushed and shoved into the unconscious. And it really allows us to move energy in our lives in ways that can make things more productive and effective. And I offer a special for all of the Access Elite members. So I'll throw it back to Elise and leave this slide up here. And then, of course, answering any questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lisa. That was wonderful. And you can tell it's such a complex topic that I feel like you probably could have talked about just for hours. There's so much to it.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. Well, thank you so much for sharing. And thank you everybody for joining us today. If you love this session, be sure to stay tuned to accesselitenow.com/events. We do have another session coming up with Lisa on June 2nd at noon. She's going to be discussing the tension of opposites. Lisa, I'm going to throw it back to you to do just a quick little, I know you said that it kind of relates to addiction, and maybe you can explain a little bit what that might mean.
Yeah, so it'll be inspired by Marion Woodman's work for any of you that are familiar with who she is. But she really gets to kind of the heart of what's behind addiction, but it's not like addiction necessarily to just substances. It's just like she wrote a whole book called Addiction to Perfection. So it's kind of at the root of all of our addiction. It's behind the I'm not good enough dialogue that's in the background, and she beautifully puts it into perspective. So I'll just be sharing her wisdom around that. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And you can sign up for that at accesselitenow.com/events. And for anybody who would like to take advantage of Lisa's offering for Access Elite members, you can sign up for a trial of Access Elite on our website, accesselite.com/anywhere. And if you have any questions about that, feel free to shoot me an email as well. It's elise@accesselitenow.com. And thank you guys so much. I hope you all have a wonderful weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.